and a lot of other stuff. Uh, Dr. Desai is a professor at the Department of Political Studies and director of the Geopolitical Economy Research Group at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Canada. She's proposed a new historical materialist approach to understanding world affairs and geopolitical economy based on the materiality of nations. Some of her recent books are Geopolitical Economy After U.S. Hegemony, Globalization and Empire, and Capitalism, Coronavirus, and War, a Geopolitical Economy, which is quickly becoming my favorite as I make my way through it, by the way. Her articles and book chapters appear in international scholarly journals and edited volumes. She co-edits the Geopolitical Economy from Manchester University Press and the Future of Capitalism book series from Pluto Press, along with Alan Freeman. Radhika?
Thank you so much, Noah.
Oh, you're muted, Radhika.
Thank you so much, Noah. And I have to say, it's a great privilege to be part of this book launch. Chiefly because I think this is a critically important book. I think it's critically important for all on the left, particularly in the English-speaking countries, to read it. And it is actually very clear and very short, and that's also a big advantage. I think particularly important is its focus on dialectics, which is much maligned and misunderstood in the English-speaking world. I remember my own teachers who taught me Marxism dismissing a lot of what is dialectics as Hegelian mystical fog. What you find in Carlos's book is a very clear discussion of dialectics, why it matters very, very practically today. In the few minutes I have, I want to liken Carlos's discussion of the purity fetish, the inability of the Western left to give up its juvenile longing for some sort of pure socialism and embrace socialism in its inevitably soiled reality, its inevitably soiled earthy reality. And I want to liken this to Marx's discussion of the fetish character of commodities. Carlos argues at the close of his introduction, and I'll be quoting Carlos a lot and I'll be quoting Marx a lot. So, Carlos argues at the close of his introduction that what can help overcome Western Marxism's purity fetish, its inability to come to terms with the reality of real struggles for socialism, the real working class, etc., and the realities of American history, is not simply, as Losurdo argues, um, learning to build a bridge between different temporalities found in Marx's notion of communism. That is, on the one hand, a utopian remote future where society inscribes on its banners, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, and the actual future where communism is described as the real movement which abolishes the present state of things. And I just like to underline that actually practically no one I know fully understands what the real movement is when Marx refers to it and why it's important. So I think Carlos's book is very important for that. So what Carlos is saying here is that the intellectual move, the intellectual understanding of what is wrong is not enough. Just as the intellectual recognition of the source of value is not enough to banish the fetish character of commodities, the mystical character that attaches itself to the commodity thanks to its social form, a social form in which the equality of the kinds of human labor takes on a physical form in the equal objectivity of the products of labor as values. The measure of the expenditure of human labor power by its duration takes on the form of the magnitude of value of the products of labor. And finally, the relationships between producers within which the social characteristics of labor are manifested take on the form of a social relation between the products of labor. This is me quoting Marx. Marx is what Marx describes as the fetishism of commodities. And his point is it inheres in the social relationships. This social significance of commodities as something above and beyond simple use values has been hard for political economy to grasp, and it continued to dog comprehensions of capitalism and the dynamics of its basic cell, the commodity, and this continues up to the present day. And Marx says, just like Carlos, mere comprehension, however, of this reality is not going to be enough to remove the mysticism and replace it with clarity. That clarity can only be achieved by a clarification, that is to say, a transformation of the social relations. And I'm quoting Marx again here. The belated scientific discovery that the products of labor, insofar as they are values, are merely the material expressions of the human labor expended to produce them, marks an epoch in the history of mankind's development. But, he emphasizes, by no means banishes the semblance of objectivity possessed by the social characteristics of labor. Something which is only valid in this particular form of production appears to those who are caught in these relations of commodity production, namely ourselves who live in capitalist societies. It appears to them to be just as ultimately valid as the fact that the scientific dissection of the air into its component parts left the atmosphere itself unaltered in its physical configuration. So Marx is saying that just intellectually comprehending this is not going to remove the mystical character of commodities, the fetish character of commodities. The reason is that the appearance arises spontaneously, not from thought, but from practice. And again, Marx says, men do not, therefore, bring the products of their labor in relation with each other as values because they see these objects merely as material integuments of homogeneous human labor. The reverse is true. By equating their products to each other in exchange as values, they equate different kinds of labor as human labor. That is to say, this equation is made in our practices. And as long as those practices continue, that impression will always linger. It will always be difficult to see through that. So, this means, again, in Marx's word, that the veil of the mystical character is not removed from the countenance of the social life processes, that is, the process of material production, until production until it becomes production by freely associated men and stands under their conscious and planned control. The mystical character of commodities will only be removed, Marx is saying, when we transform those relations that to give rise to it, which is we transform capitalist relations of production into socialist relations of production in which we consciously plan and control the larger productive economy. So, to continue with Marx, this, however, Marx says, requires that society possesses a material foundation or a series of material conditions of existence, which, in their turn, are the natural and spontaneous product of a long and tormented historical development, which here, and finish quoting Marx, Marx is basically saying that this situation of socialism will only arise as a result of a long and tortuous development, which is exactly what Carlos is referring to when he says that the purity fetish does not permit a recognition of real advances towards socialism. So Carlos's argument in the purity fetish is very similar. The purity fetish, Carlos says, cannot be removed by mere intellectual advances. It requires the emergence of a different kind of left. Only then the purity fetish will go away. And Carlos says, although this is important, that is to say, the intellectual understanding is important, a more accurate cure is for Western Marxism to reflect on the objective conditions which drive its purity fetish. And once self conscious of these, move towards changing these objective conditions. And this he puts into bracket, although I think this is actually the most important part, which means moving away from a professional managerial class dominated left towards a working class centered left, free of the dominant influence of the professional managerial class iron triangle of institutions and culture. So, in a sense, Carlos's argument is that the purity fetish is rooted in the division the separation of intellectual and manual labor, which in late capitalism has developed into a veritable class divide, which is also, by the way, a national divide in which the intellectual and manual elements of the working class occupy not just different parts of cities, but also often different countries. And that is why, of course, the struggle for socialism must always be anti imperialist. So, what Carlos is saying is that unless we move on from this sort of PMC dominated left, the professional managerial class dominated left, towards a left that is connected with the real struggles of working people worldwide, we will not be free of the purity fetish. So we must read Carlos's book not just as an attempt to take us intellectually beyond the purity fetish, but also as a call to create an absolutely different kind of left, the kind of left that Marx and Engels originally tried to build when they first came into contact with working people and set about trying to create an international organization of working people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was